August might be known as silly season in the press, but still, the right-wing papers have really got to feel ashamed of themselves. They have got some terrible material this August. This was a story in The Telegraph this week. Highly sexualized drag queen competes on BBC's Celebrity MasterChef. Highly sexualized drag queen. Look at this drag queen. This is just someone in an apron, right? The article begins like this. A row has broken out after the BBC invited a highly sexualized drag queen onto Celebrity MasterChef. Cheryl Hole, who took part in the debut series of RuPaul's Drag Race UK in 2019, appeared on Wednesday's episode of the show where she was eliminated from the heats. So she was eliminated, and they're still having a real row about this. But it has emerged that Hole, whose real name is Luke Underwood Bleach, has previously used the controversial term TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, is regarded as a slur against those with gender-critical views, and performed in front of children at Camp Festival in Dorset in 2021. Let's focus on that last claim there, that last allegation, which is that a drag queen performed in front of children at a music festival. I cannot believe they allowed a drag queen onto the BBC who performed in front of children. How shocking. Now, we can only hope, we can only pray that no one at the Telegraph has ever taken their child to see a Christmas pantomime, because they would be in for quite a fright. Obviously, the pantomime dame, a staple of British culture. Now, suddenly, the mere fact that a drag queen has performed in front of children at a music festival should mean they should be nowhere near any programme on the BBC. Let's read some more from this well-researched and insightful article. Because as you'll see, the Telegraph have interviewed some real experts on this topic. We do love to hear from experts on this topic via the Telegraph. Lucy Marsh has researched drag queens for the Family Education Trust, and she said, "It is completely inappropriate because MasterChef is a family show, and drag is not family-friendly in any circumstances. It's highly sexualized, niche, adult-only entertainment." I don't know what being niche has got to do with anything. Brendan Clark-Smith is a Tory MP. He said, quote, "Clearly I disagree with the use of the term TERF. Cheryl Hole should take note of the fact that their critics are not wishing to completely cancel them, like many of those who subscribe to gender ideology do of those with gender-critical views. Tolerance and diversity must apply to all lawful viewpoints. But if you're a drag queen, you better not appear on a cooking show." That was not part of the quote, but it's the implication of the article. There's so much to comment on here. We'll talk about this issue of drag queens being inherently sexualized in a moment. First of all, this idea that if someone says TERF, that means that they are against free speech, essentially. It's just completely bizarre. Now, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Now, to me, that is just a fairly straightforward description, right? A radical feminist is someone who thinks that men and women aren't sort of different in terms of their how they think, etc., but they think their difference is purely sort of physical. It's about genitalia, fundamentally, right? So it's an interesting movement from the 1970s. And then a trans exclusionary radical feminist is someone who thinks that trans people cannot be part of feminism. Trans people or trans women cannot be part of feminism because they are not women, right? It's a descriptive term. I find the idea that people are offended at being described as they are strange. Now, obviously, lots of people who might get called TERFs aren't actually radical feminists, but the idea that they are trans-exclusionary seems hard to argue with in many of these circumstances. Now, the stupidest thing about this whole controversy over drag queens on family shows is the pretense that this is anything new. Now, Dame Edna, Lily Savage, they were both regular features of family TV for decades. And before anyone claims, well, they weren't sexualized, perhaps you've forgotten the backstory for Lily Savage was that she was a housewife and a sex worker. Now, to bring two stories together, this is Lily Savage being interviewed by the great Michael Parkinson, who passed away this week.
The excesses of show business got the better of me. You know, when you find yourself in a skip at 5 o'clock in the morning, with one of the bass hissy rollers on your back, or a mini, you know what I mean? You think, Lily, it's time to call it a day, love. So I went back up to Liverpool for a bit.
Right. And what did you do there?
Well, I work for a friend of mine who's got an agency. Big Rita, her agency is. And I was a sort of social consultant, really. And then there was all that business with Wayne Rooney, you know what I mean? And I thought...
I didn't know about that. Wayne Rooney?
It was me, Michael, it was me.
Yeah.
I woke up, I looked at this spotty forehead. 2 inches of pubic hair, and I thought, Lily, you're too old. Get out of the game. Now he's playing for Manchester.
I know.
Yes. 50 quid, and it wasn't worth it, I believe you, mate.
Now, the Parkinson show was aired after the Watershed, so in the evening. So I imagine the jokes on blankety blank would not have been quite so explicit. But all this proves is that the same character, the same performer can have different content, can have different material for different audiences. And no one is suggesting Cheryl Hole, whatever she performs in nightclubs, was going to make explicit sex jokes on Celebrity MasterChef, right? Or in front of kids at a festival in the Isle of Wight, right? So Lily and Cheryl Cole are in the exact same position. And when it comes to Lily Savage, the Telegraph has taken a very different position. Now, after Paul O'Grady, who plays Lily Savage, passed away, they published this article. How Paul O'Grady dragged gay culture into the mainstream. The former altar boy who became Lily Savage was incapable of being dull and almost impossible to dislike. Impossible to dislike. Now, the Telegraph seems to think that anyone who is both a drag queen and has some sexual material should not appear on family shows, right? Now, the Telegraph has said that Paul O'Grady, definitely fit into both of those categories, was impossible to dislike, or at least one of their commentators has, but their general coverage of Paul O'Grady was all positive if you read the obituary or whatever. They weren't saying, how dare Lily Savage has ever been on family programs, given that the character talked to Michael Parkinson about being a sex worker and having sex with Wayne Rooney in a skip. I think they were two separate scenarios, weren't they? But in any case, Mike, before I babble on, do the likes of the Telegraph realise how hypocritical they look on this issue?
I don't think they do. I think the Telegraph in general are bad faith actors. I mean, Cheryl Hole's just on a cooking show. There's not much of a story here. And I just think we should just view the Telegraph as people who are just very muddled up in their thinking. I mean, just recently I saw the Telegraph publish an article about how the European Convention of Human Rights is a threat to democracy. Not climate breakdown, not, issues to do with poverty, but the European Convention of Human Rights. So that shows you where their priorities are as a newspaper. They're just a bit muddled up. It's one of those slow days in the press office, summer day, haven't got much to talk about. So they're moaning about who's appearing on Celebrity MasterChef rather than focusing on the bigger issues at hand. And I think this is part of the media's, I speak about this a lot on Novara, but part of the media's attempt to kind of confect these kind of big wars of issues that just, in the grand scheme of things, just don't really that matter.